Before anything else, take a second to lock in, because this story goes off the rails fast. Before we dive into the video, please like, subscribe, and comment which side you think was right, because this one is going to split people instantly. Now let's get back to the video. What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks into what should have been a harmless morning show appearance, only to realize the host sitting across from him seems determined to put him on the defensive, live on air? What unfolded next wasn't just uncomfortable television. It was an on-screen collision that forced viewers to pick sides and ask one brutal question: who was actually out of line here? This was supposed to be simple. Samuel L. Jackson had a new film coming out. His team had booked the standard promotional circuit, and everything about this stop was meant to be routine. Morning shows, friendly smiles, easy questions, quick laughs, nothing controversial, nothing heavy. Good Morning America was first on the schedule, and Jackson arrived exactly how you'd expect a veteran professional to arrive. Polite, calm, greeting the crew with warmth, completely prepared to talk about his latest project and nothing more. He had done this thousands of times, and there was no reason to expect trouble. But the moment he sat down across from Michael Strahan, something didn't feel right. The atmosphere had an edge to it, subtle but unmistakable, like a smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. Strahan's usual TV-friendly grin looked stiff, and even the handshake lingered just a beat too long, almost like he was sizing Jackson up instead of welcoming him. Samuel L. Jackson, welcome back to Good Morning America, Strahan said, his voice polished and upbeat, exactly what viewers expect in the morning. But Jackson heard something underneath it, a tone that made him straighten just a little in his chair. "Good to be here, Michael," Jackson replied, calmly, crossing his legs and settling in like someone who knows the rhythm of these interviews inside and out. He'd read rooms tougher than this, and already something was off. "So let's talk about your new film," Strahan continued, flipping through his notes like everything was right on track. Then suddenly the direction changed. "But first," Strahan added, glancing down again, "I think our viewers would be interested in some of the comments you've made recently about the industry. You've been pretty vocal about certain issues." Jackson's eyebrows lifted slightly. That wasn't the plan, and everyone involved knew it. The agreed talking points were clear. Film, cast, creative vision, keep it smooth. This felt like a deliberate detour. "Well, Michael, I've always been honest about my experiences in this business," Jackson said carefully, choosing his words with precision. "I think it's important to speak truthfully about the challenges we face, both as performers and as people." Strahan nodded along. Right. But his expression said the answer wasn't good enough. "Some people might say," he continued, stretching the moment, "that when you've had the level of success you've had, maybe it's time to focus on the positive instead of always bringing up the negative." The question didn't sound curious, it sounded like a challenge. Jackson felt his jaw tighten, but he stayed composed. He wasn't about to let a morning show host throw him off balance. "I'm sorry," he said evenly. "Are you suggesting that speaking honestly about important issues is inappropriate? Because I was under the impression this interview was about my film, not my personal philosophy." Strahan leaned forward, smile still locked in place, but his eyes sharper now. "Hey, I'm just saying what some people are thinking," he replied, as if that made it neutral. "You've built a reputation for not holding back, but sometimes viewers wonder if you're being a little too aggressive in your approach." "Aggressive?" Jackson repeated the word slowly, and the shift was visible. The relaxed movie star energy faded, replaced by something heavier. "That's an interesting choice of words, Michael," he said calmly. "Would you use that same word for other actors who speak their minds, or is that a label you reserve for certain people?" The studio audience could feel it now. What started as a standard celebrity segment was turning into a confrontation in real time. Instead of steering the conversation back to safer ground, Strahan pushed forward. "Look, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth," he said, raising his hands in a gesture that was meant to look calming, but didn't. "I'm just wondering if you ever think about how your comments come across to regular people, everyday Americans who just want to be entertained when they go to the movies." Jackson didn't hesitate. He leaned in slightly, his voice carrying authority that instantly changed the room. "Michael, let me ask you something. Do you really think the people watching this show right now can't handle honest conversations about real issues? Do you think they're too simple to understand that an actor can entertain them and still have opinions about the world around them?" For a brief moment, Strahan's polished rhythm slipped. "That's not what I'm saying at all," he responded quickly. "Then what exactly are you saying?" Jackson pressed, not letting the moment pass. "Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you want me to keep quiet, smile for the camera, and stick to a script that makes everyone comfortable. And if that's the kind of interview you want to run here," Jackson continued, his tone firm but controlled, "then say that out loud." Strahan started to respond. "I just think—" "No, let me finish." Jackson cut in, his voice rising just enough to command the room. The studio went quiet, and everyone watching could feel it. This interview was no longer routine, and it was only getting started. "I've been doing this for over 30 years, Jackson continued, his voice steady but unmistakably charged. "I've worked with some of the greatest directors in the business, been part of films that moved people, challenged people, entertained people, and not once in all that time have I apologized for having opinions or speaking my mind." He paused, just long enough for the words to sink in. "So, if that makes me aggressive in your book, then we clearly have very different definitions of that word." The studio was silent. Not the polite commercial break silence, but the kind where everyone can feel the tension pressing down on them. Producers were frozen behind the cameras, audience members sat stiff in their seats, and Strahan suddenly looked like a man who realized this interview was no longer under his control. "Look, Sam," Strahan said, and the casual shortening of the name landed badly. "I respect your career, I really do. But sometimes I think you forget, not everyone sees the world the way you do. Some people just want to hear about the movie without all the extra commentary." Jackson's eyes narrowed instantly. "Sam?" he repeated slowly. "We're on Sam terms now, that's interesting." Then he leaned forward. "So let me get this straight. You think people are too fragile to hear a conversation that goes deeper than surface-level promotion? You think your viewers are that shallow?" "I think my viewers appreciate honesty," Strahan shot back quickly. "And honestly, sometimes it feels like you're more interested in making points than actually connecting with people." "Making points," Jackson repeated quietly, and the room felt colder. "Every role I take, every film I make, every interview I give is about connecting with people," he said. "The difference is, I don't talk down to them like they can't handle complex ideas. I treat them like intelligent adults." At this point, the tension was no longer subtle, it was overwhelming. What began as a celebrity interview had turned into a philosophical standoff, with Jackson defending his right to be more than a promotional prop, and Strahan pushing back, as if determined to put him in his place. And then Strahan made a decision that only escalated everything. Instead of easing off, he leaned into the conflict, clearly believing he could regain the upper hand by becoming even more confrontational. "You know what, Samuel?" Strahan said, emphasizing the full name now, trying to regain authority. "I've been in television a long time too. I've interviewed countless celebrities. Most of them understand there's a time and place for everything. When people turn on a morning show, they're drinking coffee, getting ready for work. They want something light," Jackson responded instantly, sharp and precise. "So now you're the expert on what people want?" he said. "You've decided your audience can't handle anything beyond fluff and weather updates. That's what you're saying." "That's not what I said," Strahan snapped. "That's exactly what you said," Jackson fired back. "You just told me people having their morning coffee can't handle a real conversation. You're the one insulting your own audience, yet somehow I'm the problem for giving them more credit than that. Strahan's jaw tightened visibly. Look, he said, struggling to maintain composure. This is Good Morning America, not a philosophy seminar. People tune in for entertainment and information, not lectures. Lectures? Jackson echoed, his voice rising slightly as the audience shifted uncomfortably. Having an opinion isn't lecturing, he said. It's called being human. But apparently in your world, celebrities are supposed to clap, smile, and perform on command like trained seals. That's ridiculous, Strahan snapped. I've had thousands of guests on this show, and most of them manage to have a conversation without turning everything into social commentary. Jackson leaned back, his expression changing, the calm before the storm look anyone familiar with his films recognized immediately. Social commentary, he said quietly. When did talking about respect become controversial? When did acknowledging intelligence become political? You turned this interview in this direction, not me. We can still talk about the film, Strahan said quickly, though his tone lacked conviction. But first, I think we need to address the elephant in the room. A lot of people feel you've gotten too comfortable using your platform to push your personal agenda. My personal agenda? Jackson repeated, his voice now razor sharp. And what agenda would that be exactly? Strahan hesitated, but pushed forward anyway. A move that would haunt him. I mean, you're always talking about inequality, about how certain people are treated differently, about social issues that some believe should stay separate from entertainment. Some people think that, do they? Jackson said softly, which somehow made it worse. Then he asked the question that detonated the room. When you wake up in the morning, Michael, do you get to choose whether or not you're black? The silence was absolute. The audience froze. The cameras held steady. Even the crew seemed to stop breathing. That's not what this is about, Strahan said quickly, clearly rattled. No, Jackson replied firmly. Answer the question. Do you get to decide whether your race affects how people treat you that day? Because I don't. So when you tell me to separate my agenda from my work, what you're really saying is that my lived experience should be hidden when I'm promoting a movie. You're putting words in my mouth, Strahan protested. Am I? Jackson shot back. Because it sounds like you're uncomfortable with certain truths, and calling basic dignity a personal agenda tells me everything I need to know. This is completely unfair, Strahan insisted. I never mentioned race or dignity. I'm talking about keeping things appropriate for the time slot. Jackson let out a short, bitter laugh. Appropriate? He said. You spent 10 minutes questioning my right to speak honestly and labeling me aggressive. Now you want to pretend this conversation isn't about exactly what it's about. The studio felt like it was about to crack in half, and it was painfully clear this interview was heading somewhere no one could stop anymore. Let's reset, Strahan said, forcing a tight smile, as if that could still save him. We're clearly getting off track here, and I think the audience would really prefer we talk about your new film. Oh, now you want to talk about the film? Jackson shot back, the sarcasm sharp enough to cut glass. After spending this entire segment telling me how I should talk, what I should think, and how I should behave on your set, that's convenient. Strahan's polished television mask was starting to crack in real time. I never told you how to behave, he insisted, though the confidence was gone. I simply suggested there might be better forums for certain discussions. Better forums? Jackson repeated slowly, every word deliberate. You mean places where uncomfortable truths won't interrupt the vibe? Places where nobody has to think too hard before work? Michael, listen to yourself. Strahan bristled. I hear someone who's determined to turn this into something it doesn't need to be. You're here to promote a movie, not lecture. The audience. Jackson leaned forward again, voice steady but heavy. The reason I'm here is because your producers invited me to talk about my work. But instead, what you wanted was a compliant celebrity. Smile on cue, stick to the script, and don't challenge anyone watching at home. That's not true, and you know it, Strahan fired back, irritation finally breaking through. Then explain this, Jackson demanded. Explain why a film interview turned into you questioning my character. Explain why you labelled me aggressive instead of listening to what I was actually saying. Explain why you think it's acceptable to sit there and talk down to me on live television. Strahan turned to the camera, appealing directly to viewers as if they were his jury. I think our audience can see what's happening here. I asked reasonable questions, and suddenly we're dealing with accusations and lectures. Jackson's eyes flashed. You just did it again. He snapped. You dismissed everything I said instead of responding to it. You've been condescending from the moment I sat down, and now you're trying to play the victim because I refused to shrink. Behind the scenes, panic was spreading fast. Production assistants whispered urgently. The director waved frantically, and the control room was likely on fire, but none of it mattered anymore. Both men were locked in, and neither was backing down. I've been completely professional, Strahan insisted, though his voice betrayed him. Professional? Jackson scoffed. You questioned my integrity, undermined my intelligence, and suggested I should stay quiet about things that matter to me. If that's your idea of professional, we are living in two very different realities. Then came the moment that changed everything. Strahan, visibly frustrated and clearly misjudging the situation, leaned back and made a decision that stunned the room. You know what, Samuel? He said, voice tight. Maybe the issue isn't my questions. Maybe the issue is that you've gotten so used to people walking on eggshells around you that you can't handle being treated like a regular guest instead of getting special treatment. The words hit like a shockwave. The audience gasped audibly. Crew members froze. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Special treatment, Jackson repeated, his voice suddenly deadly quiet. Did you just suggest that expecting basic respect is special treatment? Strahan hesitated, but instead of stopping, he doubled down. I treat every guest the same, he said. I ask tough questions. That's what good interviewers do. Tough questions? Jackson shot back, his legendary intensity now fully unleashed. You haven't asked me one single question about my craft, my process, or my work. You've spent this entire time trying to put me in my place and acting like I should be grateful for the opportunity to be disrespected on your set. That's not what happened, Strahan protested, but the conviction was gone. Jackson stood up, the movement sharp and final. Several audience members leaned back instinctively, sensing something irreversible was happening. Let me tell you exactly what happened, Jackson said, voice ringing through the studio. You decided before I sat down that you were going to embarrass me on live television. You thought you could score points by knocking me down, and you miscalculated. Sit down, Samuel. We're not finished, Strahan said, trying desperately to regain control. That was the worst thing he could have said. Oh, we're finished, Jackson replied, controlled fury pouring through every word. But before I walk out of here, let me make something crystal clear. You do not get to tell me to sit down. You do not get to dismiss my concerns. And you do not get to pretend that basic human dignity is some kind of privilege. You're overreacting, Strahan muttered, his voice shrinking. Overreacting? Jackson laughed sharply. You spent 20 minutes trying to humiliate a guest, and when he didn't take it quietly, you called him dramatic. Do you hear how that sounds? Strahan glanced around the studio, searching for support, and found none. The crew avoided his eyes. The audience was silent. The moment had turned completely. Maybe we both got heated, Strahan said weakly, trying to salvage something. No, Jackson replied instantly. You got heated. I got disrespected. There's a difference. Jackson reached up and began unhooking his microphone. The finality of the gesture sent visible shock through the room. Wait, Strahan said urgently. We can work this out. Work what out? Jackson replied, disgust clear on his face. You've shown everyone exactly who you are. There's nothing left to discuss. Don't do this, Strahan pleaded, abandoning his television persona entirely. Jackson paused, looked directly at him, and delivered the line that sealed the moment. You actually think you're the victim here, he said calmly. You think being called out makes you wronged. That's the most revealing part of all this. I never meant for this to happen, Strahan said quietly. Yes, you did, Jackson replied without hesitation. You just thought it would go differently. Jackson removed the microphone completely and placed it on the table with deliberate care. To everyone watching at home, he said, turning to the camera, I'm sorry your morning turned into this, but sometimes standing up for yourself matters more than staying comfortable. He walked away. The studio erupted into stunned murmurs as Jackson exited, leaving Strahan alone at the desk, shell-shocked and exposed. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of the fallout. We'll be right back, Strahan muttered, barely audible over the chaos, but there was no resetting this. By the time the segment cut, the damage was done. What started as an attempt to control a guest had spiraled into a public unraveling. Strahan set out to label someone aggressive, but instead revealed his own condescension under pressure. And that's the part nobody could ignore. This wasn't just a walk-off. It was a reminder that when power gets challenged on live television, the mask slips fast. And once it does, no commercial break can put it back on.